Tell me how rehearsals are going. Not bad. Not exactly good yet, but not bad. We've got some strong voices, and Kim, that's Alicia Rohan playing Kim, can seriously dance. Our Hugo, Jonah Wyatt, seriously can't, but I'm using that awkwardness in his character. Jonah's making that work. She listened to him, enjoyed listening to him, talking about his kids, their strengths, their weaknesses, how tight the cast and crew had already knitted. Nobody's off book yet, but we're getting there. And Jesus, Matt, he's playing Conrad Birdie, is a total ham. He's killing it. The sets are coming together. Tech's still rough, but. And you better stop me. No, I was in the spring musical in high school twice. I know how wild and wonderful. But just let me interject. You said a grandmotherly Frenchwoman taught you to make this. Are you sure she was human? And are you, not weighing in at 600 pounds, eating your own cooking? Her name's Marie Therese. He could see her in her big, colorful kitchen, her stone gray hair and tight curls, those robin egg blue eyes sparkling when her husband, in his floppy brimmed gardening hat, came to the wide archway with a clutch of flowers in his hand. She has 4 children, he continued, 12 grandchildren, probably more by now, and a husband who still adored her after, at the time, 38 years of marriage. That's lovely, isn't it? A family cleaving together for decades. Neither one of us had that. You've got your dad. I've got Mags. How's your dad doing at Oxford? Loving it. He and Deborah try to take some time every weekend to explore the area. Who? Who's Deborah? Oh, she's his lady friend. Sounds stupid, girlfriend. Sounds ridiculous. They've been together, involved, a couple of years now. She went with him to England. Well, that's big news. Good? Yes. She ate more bread, still stupefied she'd had any part in making it. She's wonderful, and they're really good together. She's a widow, 2 grown children, also very nice. She's an artist, a painter. Dad happened to go to one of her shows, and Miranda spread her hands. He asked her out. She asked him out for coffee, and I think he was too dazed to make an excuse the way he might have. I like her a lot, and in no small part because she makes him really happy. Before they left, he asked me how I'd feel about it if he asked her to move in. And how do you feel about it? More than fine. So, Mags? They hadn't talked about family since they'd struck their deal. Is she still doing the phone psychic thing? As part of the whole, she and another friend of mine have a psychic gift shop in the quarter, readings and magic stuff. A psychic gift shop. I really have to meet your aunt one of these days. She's hooked up with this Cajun guy, sort of like your father and the artist, I guess. Do you like him? Sebastian? Sure. He's like Mags, unique. He, you would call it some contracted me for the Laporte job because he tripped over his ugly little dog and bunged up his ankle. That dog, Bluto? Maybe weighed in at about 5 pounds and had a dead-eye stare that could scare the cockodrills away. Sebastian's a thief? And as he reached for his wine glass, Booth realized he had gotten entirely too comfortable with her again. That's right. Who works for this Laporte? No, it doesn't work that way. It's like contracting. He took the job, then tripped over the dog and couldn't do the job. Laporte's not the sort who'd take personal injury into consideration, so Sebastian contracted me. How did he know to contract you? Caution came back, even if, he admitted, a bit too late. A mutual friend. Another thief? Do you all know each other? No, and no. You don't resent Sebastian for getting you tangled up with Laporte. I knew what I was getting into, or I thought I did, a job. If Sebastian had known, if I had known, Laporte would decide to add me to his collection of possessions. We'd have found another way. His tone changed, went cool and final. Look, Sebastian's the closest thing I have had to a father, okay? It's not his fault. It's not your world, Miranda. For the scope of the book, it is. So no den of thieves where you all hang out and brag about your big scores? Definitely not. Bragging gets you caught. Stay under the radar, don't get greedy. Never carry a weapon. Don't steal from friends or associates. Steal smart, live free. Why do you think Laporte's so determined to own you? Now, there's a question I've asked myself a few thousand times. First, I said no. He wanted me to turn on Sebastian, and I said no. People aren't allowed to say no to Laporte. Yeah, I got that impression reading between the lines of the articles and feature I found on him. And she might not have a feel for cracking a safe, but she sure as hell had one for prying out information. No harm filling her in, he thought. She already had plenty on him. And second, maybe I did the job too slick. It was a damn good vault, and I just have a knack for them. And, looking back, I should have lied, told him, yeah, I took a few other things, because it intrigued me. Why didn't you? Because that wasn't the job, Booth said simply. Laporte's a man with a long reach, and he found out enough about me to know how I worked. I was young, like 18, and good at what I did, with the potential to be better yet. He needs to possess the best, the most valuable, the most desirable, the most whatever. He decided I fit that, or would, and I said no. As he looked back, as he looked forward, Booth finally picked up his glass. I'll take back that painting and that sculpture one day. And there she saw what she hadn't before, a low fire simmering. Why would you do that? The painting started it, and the sculpture cost me everything that mattered to me. I wanted to put on that damn cap and gown, even give grad school a shot. I wanted to hang out with friends I'd made and sit on my neighbor's porch and drink sweet tea. His gaze shifted to hers, held. I wanted you. Then he shrugged. He won. I lost. But the game's not over. Cap and gown, grad school. She'd thought, or convinced herself, she admitted, he'd just used all that for cover. But she heard the ring of truth and saw it in that low simmer. And hearing it, seeing it, she felt a quick, hot spurt of anxiety for him. You should leave it alone, Booth. Leave him alone. You've made yourself a good place here. Have a good place here. looking to pay him back, taking some kind of revenge. Isn't that breaking your rule about staying under the radar? Exception proves it, right? It rubbed him just raw enough, even after all the years, to have him saying what he wanted. I was going to ask you to move in after graduation if I could wait that long. I'd ease off the night's work and be Booth Harrison. Maybe try teaching or figure out what I'll do. Maybe buy a house and fix you up a studio where you would write. It all seemed clear as glass. Then he came to the door, and the glass shattered. He's a patient man, but so am I. And I am not 20 and afraid anymore. I would have moved in with you, she said after a moment. But we were 20, Booth, and we can't know if we'd have made it work. If what we felt for each other at 20 would last. We never had the chance to find out. Her eyes softened, and though she didn't reach out, he all but felt her hand on his. I think Sebastian Boots had an impact on a number of young minds, and made himself a solid place in this community. That wouldn't have happened otherwise. Since you can't change what was, it's smarter to build on what is. Now I have one more question. What? What's a cocodril? It surprised him to find the laugh. It's Cajun for alligator. I thought Cajun was French, or a kind of French. It is, and has its own idioms, slang, rhythm. You could do me a favor, and for this book anyway, not put any of that in. It doesn't fit anyway. She rose, and in the habit they developed on their Sundays, began to clear. Do you speak Asian? Ma chère, you pass by next Sunday. I gotta make a grocery bill. Me. Maybe you catch me some bonsamis, and we have us a fas dodo and pass a good time. Laughing, she shook her head. That's another neck of yours. Not only the language, but the accent. You sound like you were born in the bayou. Parts of me were. Sebastian has a cottage in the bayou. He taught me a lot. She loaded the dishwasher while he divided up the leftovers. Some for him, some for her. Your psychic aunt lives in a cottage in the bayou? No, she lives over the shop in the quarter. They like having their own space, I guess, and it works for them. At first I thought, to my mortification, it was just sex with a healthy dose of affection. But they love each other. If I ever decide to set a book in New Orleans, will they show me around, give me some local flavor? Sure. They like your books. It always surprised her to hear it, and left her both flustered and proud. They do? They're both big readers, another attraction, I guess. I've never known Max to go anywhere without a book in her bag. Or a bunch of crystals, 5 shades of lipstick, a tarot deck, and, since Sebastian, a baggie of dog treats. I seriously have to meet Max. She turned, bumped lightly into him. Rather than step back, Booth put his hands on her shoulders. I can't, she said, and she stepped back, began to gather up her things. Thanks, as always, for an amazing meal. Meals as you've again tubbed me up. Tomorrow's dinner. No problem. I like cooking for somebody other than myself. You asked the bulk of the questions, and that's the deal, but I have one. She put on her coat, wound her scarf. Okay. Is anything still there? Yes. Keeping her distance, she met his eyes and gave him the truth. There's always been something there, which is why I can't. I'll see you next week. She didn't intend to go to the theater. She'd wanted, for a scene and with Lorna's permission, a stroll through the school after hours. But she heard the music, the voices, and slid through the heavy double doors. A dozen teens had the stage, with Booth standing stage left. Strong voices, he'd said, and she agreed as she slipped into a seat in the back row. She identified the girl playing the lead and agreed again on the dancing skill. She didn't appear to hold anything back, but then she played an angry teenager who snuck out for a night of rebellion. A few in the chorus missed a beat, and one spun in the wrong direction. Cut the music! I'm sorry, Mr. B. Don't worry about it, Carleen. That's what rehearsals are for. Remember, everyone, where you are. It's the Heist House, where you come to cut loose, and damn it, you've got a lot of living to do. Mark, give me those jazz hands, and Alicia, a little sharper, on the pas de bourrée. Nothing fluid here, sharp, snap it. When he demonstrated, Miranda's eyebrow winged up. From the top, places, music. Some missteps, Miranda noted, which Booth no doubt saw, and would deal with, but all in all, just fun. So much fun she had to resist applauding at the end of the number. She watched another 10 minutes while Booth worked with a couple of individual dancers and the others took a break. She considered the fact it was past 5, and he'd already put in more than 8 hours. And when he finally got home, she mused, he likely had papers to read and grade, or lessons plans to finish. She hadn't followed her father into teaching for very good reasons, she thought now. To be a good one, you needed the education and training, but you had to have the passion. Her father had it, and from where she sat, so did Booth. She slipped through the doors again. Kim and her friends had a lot of living to do, but she realized she had a lot of thinking to do. Despite her best intentions, Miranda got roped into attending a book club meeting. She found it nearly impossible to refuse her godmother, and Seska apparently found it equally impossible to stand up under Caroline Stipper's pressure. Just one meeting, she reminded herself as she parked in front of Seska's house. To answer questions on her first book, cannily assigned that month, and drum up more interest in her upcoming signing. The early March wind had fangs, and she wished with every inch of her chilly bones she could just curl up at home with someone else's book, in her pajamas, with a glass of wine, and listen to that damn wind rattle the windows. Instead, she'd dressed in what she'd consider her casual professional clothes. A black cashmere sweater with a bit of the tail and cuffs of the crisp white shirt showing, stone gray trousers, and black, stubby-heeled boots. She'd French braided her hair and added simple studs to her ears and a silver-framed moonstone pendant she'd found at the treasure chest on Main Street. She started to knock, but over the wind heard voices and laughter, so just went in. There she is! Seska popped up from one of the living room chairs. Several folding ones joined the usual and hurried to embrace her. I'm sorry, am I late? No, no. Let's have your coat. You're right on time. You haven't met everyone yet, so everyone, this is Miranda. A chorus of female voices responded with, Hi, Miranda. Some had wine, others what looked like coffee or tea. They ranged in age from their 20s to possibly 80s, and all looked at her with eager, curious faces. She thought again, longingly, of her pajamas. Come sit down. We saved a chair just for you. Tracy, honey, get Miranda a glass of wine. No, I can. I'm on it, Tracy popped up. We like to have a chatty little time before we get to our discussion. You know Lorna and Tracy. Thanks, Tracy. Seska added when the realtor brought in the wine. And Margot. The pendant looks great on you. Margot, a proprietor of the treasure chest, beamed. And Caroline, of course, and Lila. You spoke to some of her students last month. She began introducing the rest, so the names rattled around in Miranda's head. She sucked at this, she thought, just sucked at this part of writing. But she put on her delighted to meet you author face. Oddly, it got easier when they began to pepper her with questions. Even, she realized, enjoyable when she sat back as they debated each other. And who wouldn't find vast entertainment in listening to a couple of women argue with considerable passion about one of her characters? The character she'd base loosely on Booth. He was an asshole, Margot insisted. A himbo asshole. Miranda held back a snicker, as that's exactly what she'd aimed for. He was so young, Lorna argued, barely out of his teens. He used Fiona, one of the others put in. Use that charm, that and the shy boy pose to lure her in, just for the sex. Guys that age all think with their genitals. When does that stop? Seska wondered, and got a subtle pat from Lorna beside her. The oldest member, Esther, retired librarian, cackled. I'll let you know if and when. He did use her, this from Lila, and then tossed her aside so coldly, but still, he paid such a terrible price for it. What do you say, Miranda? Asshole or victim? She smiled at Lorna. It can be both. And you all are right. He was an asshole. He did use her, and the way he tossed her aside played a part in her emotional life and her choices for a long time. But he never had the chance to redeem himself, to choose to redeem himself or not. Because, Miranda could admit to herself, she hadn't wanted him to find redemption or have a choice. She'd wanted to end him, and by the act of writing that end, close off her feelings. It had worked for a very long time. She had more fun than she'd expected to, and realized her circle of female friends had spread out and scattered so much since her college days. Contact found itself limited to occasional and to rare dinners, and more often texts and emails. She'd missed the casual intimacy of women gathered together. As the evening broke up and Seska chatted at the door with people heading home, Miranda carried glasses and dessert plates into the kitchen with Tracy. I'm really glad you came. It adds something to have the person who wrote the book right here. Adds something for the winter too. And I love seeing Seska with good friends. She took a big leap moving here. She did, and that was really brave. You love her. I could see that. I'm glad I had a chance to really see that. Speaking of moving, even temporarily, how are you liking life on the river? It's great. The house is perfect for what I need right now. I've got the quiet, the convenience, and the views. And a sexy neighbor, Tracy added. I had an open house last Sunday out your way and noticed your car at Sebastian Booth's house. She thought, whoops, but kept the casual tone. Oh, he's helping me with some research. I'm working on a character, a chef. And the man can cook. We dated some way back, but I got a sample. She grinned when she said it. He's a good guy. Seems to be, Miranda said easily. I sat in a corner of the kitchen at Ronaldo's for a couple of hours, so got a solid sense of how a restaurant kitchen works. Booth's giving me more a sense of, I'd say it's an art of making food. My idea of cooking is to open a jar and call for Chinese. I hear you. Nick and I ate, trying to learn. Nick and I are trying to learn together to make actual food instead of grab and go. It's nice, cooking together. Sexy too, just saying. She didn't want sexy, Miranda thought as she took the short drive to Booth's the following Sunday. Not for this area of the book, and not in her personal life. But what she did want for the book was the sensuality of cooking. All those senses engaged, the scents, textures, the sizzle and simmer, the act of slicing, stirring, blending, and the tasting. She pulled in beside Booth's car and realized someone else could drive by, recognize hers, and speculate. Didn't matter, she decided. She'd go back home in a few months, and Booth, he'd stay or go. Icicles dripped from the eaves of his house, and the quiet plop-plop reminded her spring lurked around the corner. Somehow March had arrived, and the book signing loomed. Rather than think about it, she admired the snow. He'd shoveled, plowed, snow-blown the drive and the walk, but the rest lay untouched, a white blanket with a thin glimmer of ice from melt, freeze, remelt. Smoke curled up from the chimney, so she knew a fire waited inside, and so did he. Walking a fine line, she thought, coming here week after week, spending these hours with him inside all those scents, flowers, textures. For work, she reminded herself. And, admittedly, to prove to herself she could walk that fine line without slipping off. If she still had feelings for him, she handled them. She rang the bell, wiped her boots on the mat, and geared herself up to handle it. He answered, jeans with a hole working into the knee, a sweatshirt, Asian chucks that compromised his usual Sunday uniform. I told you didn't have to knock. I rang, but in either case, blame my southern upbringing. His house smelled of oranges and vanilla. The fire snapped, the flowers gleamed. Did you polish the floor? Yesterday. She took off her coat, scarf, and, because he'd do it if she didn't, took them into his mudroom, depressingly organized, to her view, to hang beside what she decided was a work jacket, for shoveling, plowing, or snow-blowing. I've got wood floors. Am I supposed to do that? Wood needs to be cleaned. Plus, it gets thirsty. Plus, it looks better. You have those amazing floors in your family house. Didn't the cleaning crew clean and polish them? Yes, now that you mention it. And she added a chore to her list for the rental. Rather than ask him how to do it, she'd look it up. Less lowering. So, I'm planning a heist. Okay. He got them both Cokes. What are you after? Inspired by these private hoarding rooms, I want him to break into one, take painting, artist to be determined, an antique ivory netsuke, I think, and a carved French porcelain vase from the Baroque period. That's quite a haul. Sticking with art? That's his thing. So how does he do it? You tell me. When he sat, she slid onto the next stool. It's an estate inside a family compound, she began. She described the house, the grounds, and gave him a good picture. He could imagine himself finding the weak spots, the blind spots, going over the wall, and gave that back to her. For the first hour, he took her through the steps, the pitfalls, the tools while she took notes. She'd fill in the drama, she thought, the tension, the risks, and rewards, but he gave her the practicalities. Say there's also a vault in the room. Would he try for that, too? It depends on how much time he has and how great he is. It's going to be money, and maybe bearer bonds, jewelry, or loose stones. If he's primarily an art thief, why not just make more of what's sitting right there? She frowned at that. You wouldn't go for the vault? Not unless what's in it is my target to begin with. No. But he's not me. No, he's not. I think he goes for it because stealing's an addiction for him. It would be, for him, like an alcoholic on a binge, saying no to one more round. It's a miracle he hasn't been caught before. Maybe, she thought, but he's been lucky. That can happen, and that feeds the addiction. It's the murder of the woman he used that changes things for him. He liked her, but he slept with her purposefully to get the bird. He succeeds, and she's murdered. It looks like whoever stole the bird killed her, but he stole it, and didn't. Now it's like the telltale heart for him, the bird's haunting him, and finding out who killed her becomes more important than the addiction. So the heist is before the bird and the murder. I'm going to open with it. More editing, more redrafting, she thought, but worth it. I wasn't, but I realized I needed to set him up for the story and the reader right off. I want that impact, that tension straight off, showing who he is. That way, the changes, the redemption, so to speak, and the outcome all have more impact. I hope, she qualified. But then the juxtaposition of showing him cooking, his restaurant, his other life. There was a Renoir stolen from a house in Houston about a decade ago, worth about $1 million back then. It might be a good choice. Most people know Renoir, if not the painting. You can look it up. I'll do that. Did you steal it? No. Armed nighttime robbery. I don't do armed or terrified people. Because I want him sympathetic and because I see him pretty clearly, I'm taking a page from your book on that. He doesn't hurt people, and that makes his guilt over the woman sharper, because the theft caused her death. Booth got up as she spoke, retrieved a large bag from the refrigerator, then a bowl, a pot, and some newspaper. He poured shrimp from the bag onto the paper. You got me thinking about New Orleans last time, so we're making shrimp etouffee. She set her notebook aside, but close enough to scribble something down. I've not only never made it, I've never eaten it. That changes today. He gave her an assessing look. That's a nice sweater. So I'd roll up the sleeves. We start by peeling the shrimp. The shrimp go in the bowl, the peels in the pot to make the stock. We're making stock out of peels? It's how it's done. When he peeled about 10 to her 1, she hissed, I've only peeled them after they're cooked, like spiced shrimp. You'll get there. She got there, slowly, then washed her hands a lot. Booth set out an onion, celery, and a green pepper. Behold, the holy trinity of New Orleans cooking. Do we pray over it? To it? Neither. We're going to chop half the onion, a rib of celery, and use the top and bottom of the green pepper for the stock. She had to detour to note it all down. How does that make stock? By adding water, chopping some garlic, tossing in some bay leaves, and cooking it for about 45 minutes. He sliced the onion, started chopping, so she took the celery. How is it your eyes don't water when you chop onions? My steely will. He guided her through the rest, then put the pot on the stove. Then he had her kneading bread dough again. Doing her best with it, she shot him a look. Do you ever consider just buying bread? You know what the difference is between a loaf of store-bought French bread and homemade? Everything. You've got a good hand for kneading. Form your ball, and we'll let it rise while we get started on the rooks. I know the term, but what is it exactly? Flour and fat. Yum. At that, she flashed a grin. You're damn right. Brown roux. He glugged, no measuring, oil into another pot, got a whisk, and began adding flour. You're going to stir it in constantly over the heat. You don't want clumps. Nobody likes a clumpy rook. And you don't want it to burn. Call for delivery, she thought. Slap a sandwich together. You still got food. How long do you have to do that? 10, 15 minutes. It'll go silky. She decided cooking Booth's way meant she could skip a day of upper body workout. Her buys, tries, and shoulders got a solid workout every damn Sunday. And after your arm falls off, you have a nice, flavorful rook. Try it. My thief has an eclectic restaurant, she said as she tried her hand at whisking, so I can see him making this. She leaned over to look at the other pot. I guess it's starting to look like stock. Because it is. Keep whisking. Right, right. I'm going to have serious guns between all the kneading, the whisking, the stirring. Oh, I saw some of your rehearsal last week. He'd crouched down to select a bottle of wine from his cooler, stopped to look up at her. You did? I have the scene in school after hours. Thought why not get a feel, and I heard the singing. You were doing a lot of living to do. They're really good, Booth. They're getting there. I sat in the back for, well, about as long as I have to stir this roux and really enjoyed it. I didn't realize you did the choreography. We can't afford to pay somebody to do it, and I'm lucky to have a couple students and cast members who know dance. They've had some good input. It looked fun, like the kids were having fun. No point in it otherwise. They work hard, so fun's important. He opened the wine, got out glasses. I'll take over. You can have a quick break before we do the vegetables. More chopping. The rest of the onion, the green pepper, a few jalapenos, more celery, more garlic. She took the wine, leaned back on the counter while he continued with the roux. I did the book club, Seska's book club, a couple of days ago. That was more fun than I thought it would be. I really don't like sitting around analyzing a book, especially my own, but they're a nice and understanding group of women. Lorna tried to pull me in. We need a man. Booth, be a man, he said in a very credible Lorna tone. I like talking books, but the whole assigned reading, I have school for that. Tracy's one of them. She mentioned she saw my car here last Sunday. He glanced over. Is that a problem? No. I told her you were helping me with research. She gestured to the pots. This sort. I didn't realize the two of you had a previous thing. We didn't, not really. We liked each other. Still like each other. We just got together a few times. Is that a problem? Of course not. Good. Get chopping. She chopped. You know, some of this is oddly soothing. Not quite zen, but soothing. More work than I'd put in making a meal for myself. But I might actually try something simple and have Dad and Deborah over for dinner. Over? I thought you lived at home. Now she chopped and laughed. God, Booth, I'm over 30. I have my own town house, my own place. I see Dad all the time, but I moved out years ago. I actually toyed with, for about 5 minutes, following Zed and RJ's lead and trying New York. Did you know they moved to New York the summer after graduation? I saw Zed on Broadway a few years ago. You did? Did you talk to him? He shook his head. Better to avoid awkward questions. But he was really good. He played Billy Flynn in a revival of Chicago. Do you keep in touch? Off and on. I know RJ just got engaged. He didn't pop like Zed, but he's done off-Broadway and regional. How about Haley? She's in LA. She's a screenwriter. She loves it out there. She got married last year. Would I have seen any of her stuff? She's working on a streaming series, Coldplay, second season. It seemed normal and soothing rather than prickly to talk about the lives of people they both knew, or had known in this case. I'll take a look. Need those veg now. This is ready. Hold the garlic. But all the rest. He switched to a wooden spoon, stirred and mixed as she added to them, as he stood close inside the heat from the pots. That's going to cook a few minutes. Then we'll add the garlic, cook it a couple more. Isn't it crowded in your brain? Lots of rooms and boxes in there. Punch down the bread, remember how? It's my favorite part. But for the eating. Punch it down, use a tool to divide it, cover, then let it rest on the board. It was interesting, she decided, and satisfying. At least enough she could transfer the feeling to her character. I'm never going to love cooking, but I see how some do. All the scents, the colors, the feel of bread dough in your hands. He showed her how to add the stock to the pot. and how to shape the bread before the next rising. She sat with her wine. This dish is labor intensive. Worth it. So your book signing's coming up. All too soon. He took a moment to sit next to her. You don't like doing them? It's not like... I always feel just a little odd, at least at first. It's great, really, meeting readers. People who will actually sit down and read what you wrote. I end up being energized and drained at the same time. I like the quiet, she said with a sigh, which is more odd, but it's why, in the end, I didn't go to New York or LA or somewhere else. Traveling's wonderful, seeing, experiencing, all great. But I like knowing I have the quiet after. Why not New York, for instance, for you? It seems like you could disappear there, if that's the goal for your sabbatical. I like the quiet. He shifted to the view, out his kitchen doors. I like looking out at that instead of traffic or a street, people hurrying from one place to another. So does she, oddly enough. How did we get so boring? Although I can't say what you do is. It's a job, it's work, a career choice. He shrugged it off. And it takes a lot of quiet time, like writing. I think that's the only similarity you can pull out on that. I don't know. After angling his chair, he stretched out his legs. You plan, you plot, you have a goal, you make adjustments as needed, and you work alone. And now you're going to make another egg wash. Oh God. And we're going to add the shrimp, make some rice, bake the bread. Then we'll have a really good meal. He didn't lie. Miranda sampled a bite, held up a finger, took another. This is great. It's got some nice heat on it, and it's pretty. She tried the bread, sighed. Okay, maybe you've got a point about the difference being everything. You made it. I helped make it. No, I helped, he corrected. You worked on every step of the meal. You should be able to show your chef character putting a meal together like this. As she ate, she considered her character, his flaws, and somewhat shaky virtues. He's attracted or drawn into the sensuality of cooking, even in the chaos of a commercial cooking. That's part of it for him. Smoke, steam, sizzle, scents. But the stealing, that's business, the family business, and an addiction. But cooking, that's passion. I made a sign to have him retire, at least try to, from the business at end. I'm not sure yet. Then she considered Booth. Do you ever think about that? It's not a family business, but you could say it's something you grew up in. I thought about it in college. Now I'm taking this longer break than I planned on, and I'm living this life. She wanted to know for the book, but she couldn't deny. She just wanted to know. Isn't that hard, even disorienting, shifting from one life to another? I don't know. He couldn't say he thought too deeply on it, but basically it's acting, and to inhabit a part, to really project to the character you just become. And sometimes it's liberating, sort of tabula rasa. Then you can see what you write on the next slate. That's interesting. She gestured with her fork. I suppose everyone, at one point or another, wishes they could just wipe the slate clean, start over, do, be, have something else. Thoughtfully, she scooped up more etouffee. I guess that's what my mother did. Does that still sing? No, no, not really. I can work it up to a sore spot at most, and do, she admitted, when I'm feeling bitchy about it. But really, it's just part of my history. Is she still in Hawaii? She is, though not with the guy she left with. Biff, he remembered, and made her laugh. No more Biff. That went south 5, 6, 7, not sure, years ago. Apparently, he did to her what she did to Dad, but took most of their money with him. Nice guy. Well, you get what you pay for, so to speak. I know all of this because she actually contacted Dad, begged for a loan. I objected, but he overruled me. She gave him you. She nodded over a bite of bread. That's exactly what he said, and shut down my objections. Anyway, he sent her money, not a loan. Just here you go, so she could get back on her feet. She now owns a tattoo parlor, has her own tattoo sleeves, got a boob job, and has a boy toy. He looks about my age. She sipped wine, smiled over the rim. Social media, I couldn't resist. So she started another slate. It must be hard, being so dissatisfied with your life every few years, never finding the sweet spot. I'd feel sorry for her, but I just don't have that sort of generosity in me. It wouldn't matter to her, Booth pointed out. Why waste it? Excellent point. It's not like that for you. For you, it's part of what you do. Clearly, you're happy in the life you're living now. Sure, part of it is the luck of where I landed, stumbling onto this house before I'd even nailed down the job. Some days it's drudgery, or you tangle with a kid who's determined to screw up his life, and yours if he can. And I'll think, hey, I could be sitting on the terrace of a villa in Corfu, looking out at the Ionian Sea and sipping some ouzo. And strangely, despite the sweatshirt and worn jeans, she could see him there. But you go back the next day, because the next day lights some spark and you actually see, something click in some kid's head. You see the door open, or you see a bunch of kids on stage reaching for something, and you know some of them are going to grab it and hold on to it. He shrugged. And the Ionians are not going anywhere. I've never been to Greece. Would I like it? I did. The culture, the art, the antiquity, the food, all of it. I bet you learned the language. Enough to handle myself. Say something in Greek. He looked her in the eyes, her sea witch eyes, and said something in Greek. Sounds like more than handling yourself. What did you say? I said. He lied. It's nice to have company for an excellent meal. It is. At home, on a day like this, I'd probably open a can of soup and shake a portion out from a bag of salad. He winced. That actually hurt my heart. She winged up the eyebrow. I could go a little wild and squirt some cheese, whiz on a few crackers. Stop. Quick, handy, tasty. Anyway, tell me about one of your jobs. No, not just any, she decided. Your first. The first time you broke and entered. He knew she'd circle back to the book and told himself to accept it. That's a pretty good one, actually. A client's neighbor was over during a cleaning job, and they sat in the dining room having coffee, talking. I'm doing the kitchen floor while the neighbor's complaining and joking about her husband's stamp collection. Obsessed with it, she claims, and tosses out big numbers he paid for his single stamp. He picked up his wine. I hadn't given stamps a lot of thoughts, but that got my attention. How old were you? About 12. I'm mulling over it while they're talking about this charity fundraiser they're doing, so I volunteered to help the neighbor haul out some of the stuff for the auction from her house to her car. So you walked right into her house? Helped her with the boxes, got a good look at the alarm system. I could take that. Actually saw the husband's study. It fell in my lap. Your 12-year-old lap. Yeah. Biding my time. The neighbors had vacation plans, so I waited until I knew I'd have an empty house. Nice big house. Nice quiet neighborhood. It didn't take much to get through the locks or bypass the alarm. He paused a moment while it rushed back every detail. It felt incredible. No point in pretending otherwise. Standing there in the dark, silent house where I had no business standing, I knew I could go all through it, take anything I wanted, and no one would ever know. Is that what you did? What? No. Why not? You're 12 and everything is there for the taking. Because that's not how it works, not for me. Knowing I could was the magic. The stamps were the job. Anyway, I'm in the study, going through his stamp albums. He had them well catalogued. I pick out what I researched and lights flash on, music blasts. Miranda actually jumped, then laughed at herself. They hadn't gone on vacation after all. No, they'd gone. But what I didn't know is their son bopped in from college to party. Now I'm hunkered under the desk in the guy's den, and the college boy is in the kitchen, right through glass doors, in his boxers, and he's with a girl in her underwear. They're pouring wine and sexy dancing, laughing until she had to press a hand to her stomach. Miranda pressed the other to her face. Oh God, what did you do? Well, I watched and tried to figure out how to get out with the stamps, but mostly just hunkered down in the dark and watched. Then she started stripping while sexy dancing, and well, and we'll just say I had a strong reaction. The next laugh snorted out before she could stop it. I bet you did. I'd never seen a naked girl, a real live naked girl, and he is pulling off his boxers, and then they're all over each other, right there in the kitchen. I knew how it was supposed to work, but I'd never seen it actually work in person, in progress. Delighted, she propped her elbow on the table and her chin on her fist. Stamps or live porn? What's a pubescent boy to do? Hard choice, but I needed to get out while they were distracted. So I took the stamps, slithered out, kept slithering, reset the alarm, and took off. He rose to clear. They never copped to a break-in, but figured somebody helped themselves at one of the parties he had. And I paid a lot of bills with those stamps and furthered my education. At 12, she thought, as she helped him clear. So was that your transition from picking pockets? I wouldn't say that. I'm just diversified. She started to load the dishwasher, the signal their Sunday session wound down. If she regretted the wind down just a little, it seemed natural. Can you show me how you did that with my watch? How you got it off without me feeling it? It just takes a light, quick touch. He brushed a hand over her wrist, like that. She held up her arm. I'm still wearing the watch. But you're not wearing this. He held up the necklace. It's a nice moonstone distraction, he told her, and a light, quick touch. Her mouth opened in shock, then she let out a laugh. That's ridiculous, and I wasn't that distracted. Just enough. You probably want this back. He draped the necklace back on, and from behind her clasped it. Those fingers skimmed over the nape of her neck. If she closed her eyes just a moment over the sensation, it seemed natural. I do, thanks. It's a new favorite piece. How about this? She turned, saw her watch dangling from his fingers. Booth! All right, that's past ridiculous into uncanny. She took back her watch, clasped it back on. You could have a magic act. Nothing up my sleeve except he slid her necklace out of his sleeve. This. Her eyes sparked both amusement and wonder. I can see any time I walk down the street now. I'm giving everyone else a 10-foot berth. And your aunt taught you? The basics, yeah. He circled a finger, so she turned again and smiled when she deliberately closed a hand over the watch on her wrist. In her defense, it was entertainment, not a guide. There you go. Moonstone, that very nice Baume and Mercier. I'll just keep these for the lesson fee. He held up her earrings, grinned when she slapped her hands to her earlobes. Come on. French wires, easy pickings. I'll remember that. She held out her hand. Instead, he moved in another few inches to slide one, then the other back in place. They look good on you. Thanks. She felt her heart slip and the longing rise. You're blocking me in, Booth. Sorry. He stepped back, and those clever hands went into his pockets. I'll finish up in here. I'll give you some to take home, so you lay off the cheese whiz. He walked to the island, got out a container. Miranda stood there, where she was. That's a thing about you. Another thing about you. You take no and don't push. Even though we both know right now a little push would be to your advantage. I don't want to push for advantage. He looked straight at her, straight into her, not with you. I can't repeat a mistake. Like a fire sparked, his eyes went molten. It wasn't a mistake, and I'm damned if you'll call it one. You can say the way I handled things was, and okay, even though I don't know what I could have done otherwise. But that time with you, those last couple days, it was the best weekend of my life, before or since. It was perfect. It wasn't a goddamn mistake. Temper kindled temper. You could have told me the truth. That's an otherwise. Really? So in your scenario, I say, hey, Miranda, the girl who's just spent an amazing weekend with me, whose father not only one of my favorite professors, but who's had me in his house. I say, here's a fun fact about me. I'm a thief, plus all those transcripts that got me into the university, fake. And now some crazy rich guy I pulled a job for a few years ago is back. He wants me to do another. Or he'll hurt my aunt, maybe you, maybe the handful of friends I've made. So now what? He shoved at the container, paced away. Call the cops? The FBI? And tell them what? This guy wants me to steal this statue? Oh, why me? Because that's what I do. My name? Oh, well, which one? Maybe you're right. I don't know. Maybe I could have helped you. You don't know. You don't know. I don't know. But what I do know is if I told you, he'd have more reason to hurt you. I didn't tell Mags until it was done for the same reason. That stopped the rise of resentment cold. You didn't tell your aunt? Not until it was over, and I was on my way basically to France. She wasn't all that happy with me either, but she was safe. She didn't know why that changed things even a little, but it did, she thought, because he loved his aunt, and she'd been a constant in his life. How did you tell her if you left? Burnophones. I got her and Sebastian Burnophones. No emails, no letters, no other communication. I didn't see her until the next year. She goes to Mardi Gras, and she slipped out to the private plane I arranged and flew over. We'd promised each other we'd spend a few days together every year, no exceptions, on or before April 1st. His only family, she thought, his only connection to home. And you've both found ways to keep your promise? Yeah, we find ways. So he walked back, finishing filling the container. His tone was calm now, as if the spike of temper and emotion hadn't happened. Holding himself back, she realized, holding his true self in. And wasn't she doing exactly the same? You must have enough for your book by now. Probably. It'd be easier on both of us if we cut out these Sundays. Probably, she repeated. He held out the container. She took it, then set it down. Enough, she thought. Enough pretense, enough filters, enough denials on both sides. Why don't you ask what I want? What do you want? Maybe I wanted you to push a little so I didn't have the responsibility, but that moment's past. She crossed to him, laid her hands on his cheeks, touched her lips lightly to his, and her heart did a slow turn as he looked at her so much like he had that first day in class 1,000 years before. Intense, wary, a little pissed. Maybe I want to take back, even if it's just for today, what he stole from us. I loved you the way you can love at 20, no restrictions, so sweeping, with a future all laid out in beautiful colors. Maybe I want a little of that back, even if it's just for today. I don't. I think you owe me. I think you want to make it up to me for dimming those colors. She kissed him again, felt him hold back, pull back. Make it up to me, Booth, she murmured. She linked her arms around his neck, then boosted up to wrap her legs around his waist. Take me upstairs. Her head swam, her kisses turned urgent. Take me to bed. I'll have to have my way with you on the kitchen counter. You're not allowed to regret it. You're not allowed to call it a mistake. We're adults now. She feasted on his throat as he carried her out of the kitchen. It's just sex. He stopped, drew back to meet her eyes. We are, and it's not. Undone, she dropped her forehead into his. Not a mistake to admit it, but a risk. She took the risk. No, it's not. She did what she'd wanted to do for weeks, and combed her fingers through his hair. I'm only going to ask you for one thing. I'm inclined to give it. Don't just leave again. I won't either. If and when it's time for one of us to leave, we don't just go. Deal. In the bedroom, he set her on her feet, then reached up to unbraid her hair. If you change your mind about this, they'll find my broken body on the ground under the window. I can't be responsible for that. She tugged off his shirt, then skimmed her hands over his chest. He really kept in shape. A paunchy thief's a slow thief. God, your hair. With it loose, he buried his face in it. I missed seeing it, touching it. With his eyes on hers, he lifted her sweater up and off. Seeing you, touching you. He gathered her up, gathered her in, and finally met her mouth with his and let himself take what he wanted, all he wanted. A dream come to life, a dream swimming in his senses until it saturated him. With slow, sumptuous kisses, with her mouth yielding to his, taking from his, the past and the present blurred together into something separate and only theirs. A flower long dormant, finally unfurled. He laid her back on the bed, linked his fingers with hers. To draw out the moment, he feathered kisses on her brow, her eyelids, her cheeks, then, with her lips against his, sank. Everything in her woke and stretched and yearned. She hadn't slept, she thought. She had a life, lovers, work. But with that kiss, it felt as if some part of her, something elemental, woke again. He kept her hands clasped in his while his lips roamed, and the sensation of helplessness overwhelmed and seduced and taunted her to surrender. I've dreamed of you. His tongue slid under her bra to find her, stir her, of you, of this, and I'd wake up with the scent of your hair all around me. He trailed a lips, teeth, tongue up her throat. Now here you are. You tortured me, sitting or standing in my kitchen. All those questions. I know. Breathless now, wonderfully breathless now. I want it so. Bull's eye. He lifted one of her hands, nibbled her knuckles. I'm entitled to a little payback. Her hips arched, her pulse pounded. Help yourself. Gonna. He released her hands, and in a lightning move released her bra. She reached for him as he slipped it off, but he gripped her hands again. This time he took her arms over her head. I'm helping myself. Her heart stumbled under the lazy demands of his mouth. Had she forgotten? How could she have forgotten how she could take and give such aching pleasure? The pleasure built until she began to tremble, then began to writhe. With his mouth alone, he shot her to peak. He felt her rise, and he felt her fall before he released her hands so his could touch. All that lovely skin, so smooth, just a bit damp now from the heat they brought each other. All those sweet, subtle curves and long limbs he could finally touch and explore and possess again. Her hands moved over him urgently as her body moved under his and offered all he wanted. Then they knelt on the bed, rushing to undress each other. Her laugh hitched out. Get those damn shoes off and finish what you started. I'm still looking at you. Look later, finish now. Booth, Booth, she repeated, and got those endless legs around him to take him in. Her nails dug into his shoulders as her head fell back, and still he looked, the fall of her hair, the need in her eyes as they took each other, everything he wanted surrounding him, a dream so long out of reach now warm and vibrant in his arms. Whatever price to come, he gave himself to it, to her. No regrets. She didn't curl up against him as she'd once done. She wasn't the naive girl she'd once been. Certainly no longer a woman who believed love somehow forged a path for all. And he wasn't the sweet, shy boy she'd fallen headlong in love with, but a man so much more complex and complicated. In bed, beside him, she could admit the man fascinated her. An honest assessment, and she wanted honesty, added excitement and appeal. But all of those reactions didn't add up to love, which, even if it did clear a path, still left that path with bumps and pitfalls and obstacles. So she concluded, all good. Then he reached over, linked his hands with hers. She closed her eyes and dug for defenses she usually had at the ready. It's not just sex, he said, and we're okay. I'm not looking for romance, relationships, or happy ever after, Booth. Those things aren't on the menu for someone like me, and we're still okay. There's something between us, Miranda, and always has been. I'm willing to take that for now and be glad for it. He sat up, looked down at her. I didn't run straight off when I saw you again because of the kids, but that wasn't the only reason. You didn't go straight to Lorna or the cops because you wanted some answers, and you could use them, but that's not the only reason. She sat up with him, and now in the full dark, studied the shadow of him. No, it's not. I'm only here until July. See? That's glass half empty. I see it like I've got 3 months with you, so let's take them. I always think, if the glass is half empty, get off your ass and pour some more into it. Giving in wasn't giving up, she thought, and brushed a hand through his hair. All right, Booth, we'll pour some more. He leaned forward just enough to touch his lips to hers. Stay. That may equal filling the glass so it overflows and spills all over the floor. We'll start slower. Stay for coffee and dessert. We don't drink coffee. I'll have a latte. If you want to call that coffee. She cocked her head. What dessert? We'll have hot fudge sundaes. You do not have hot fudge sundaes in your freezer. No, but I have ice cream in there, a jar of fudge topping in the pantry, and whipping cream in the fridge. Put them together, and you have sundaes. Whipping cream? What's wrong with the stuff that comes in a tub or can? Don't get me started. Before she could get dressed, he handed her a robe and pulled on sweats. After due consideration, Miranda decided if you knew you were being maneuvered, you weren't actually being maneuvered. She handled the coffee while Booth transformed a container of whipping cream. Then she sat at his kitchen counter in his robe and ate a hot fudge sundae. I thought I'd come to your singing next weekend. You don't have to do that. I teach lit, he pointed out. We have a best-selling author in the house. What kind of example would I set skipping it? And you can reciprocate by coming to one of my performances of Birdie. I'd already planned to. Really, nobody's going to notice or care if you come by the signing. Amused, he tapped his spoon in the air. That's where you're wrong after 3 months in West Bend. You don't like doing them, the signings. I didn't say that. Your whole body said that. Why not? She sighed, played her spoon into the ice cream. They always make me feel like someone I'm not. Writing the solitary, just you and the story, then after all, it's all done. People want you to go out there and, well, perform. Stage fright? I never worried about going out on stage. I liked doing plays in school, but you're supposed to be doing, but you're supposed to be somebody else. In a play, that's the whole point. Every actor brings something of themselves to a part. The bookstore, in this case, is your stage. I like meeting readers. I'm grateful people spend the time reading something I wrote. It just takes me out of my nice, cozy comfort zone, where it's just you and the story. Yeah. Then again, one of the reasons I'm taking this time in West Bend is to widen that comfort zone. You can get entirely too comfortable, and then routine, and I'm a fan of routine, becomes a rut. She licked whipped cream from her spoon, then gestured with it. Ruts aren't a problem for you because you change routines, location, everything whenever it suits. It doesn't always suit. Sometimes it's just necessary. My character's too invested in his restaurant to change things up. Do you steal from women you sleep with? No, Jesus. Appalled, he dragged his hands through his hair. That's a hell of a question when you're sitting there naked under that robe. He does. That's a major plot point. He slept with the victim, and she's not the first he slept with and stolen from. Just the first who ends up murdered. Why don't you? Intimacy as access. Because, in the first place, it's just rude. She laughed, then set down her spoon and laughed some more. Then, leaning over, she cupped his face in her hands. You would think that and feel that. It's part of what makes you hard to resist. That odd moral code. Squishy. Odd, squishy, but genuine. And in the second place, there's usually a second if there's a first. In the second place, it's a direct connection. If you're not already in the wind, the cops are probably going to have some questions for you. Yeah, I'm using that part. She picked up her spoon again, smiled at him. You make a damn good hot fudge sundae. I also make a damn good cheese omelet. You could get in on that if you stayed. You're already in on it because I'll be making it from the eggs you screwed up, making the egg wash. Instead of one arching eyebrow, instead of one arching up, her eyebrows drew together. I didn't screw up that many. I have more eggs. She studied a spoonful of fudge-laced ice cream before eating it. Does it come with bacon? And toasted French bread? Well, I guess we could mop up whatever spills out of the glass onto the floor. I happen to have a mop, he told her. She stayed.